Right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is your host, Manoj Sakya. I'm a PhD third-year student here in School of Computer Science and Engineering, NTU. My research area is basically machine learning, particularly reinforcement learning. So in today's SLS talk, student lecture series talk, we have invited Mr. Emad. Emad, he's a good friend of me and he's a good friend of, colleagues. He's also a third-year PhD student in School of Computer Science and Engineering, NTU. And his research interest lies in deep learning, time series data, biomedical sensor data, and so. So in today's talk, his presentation title is Time Series Representation Learning via Temporal and Contextual Contrasting. For further, before I invite him, just a quick housekeeping. Please mute during the presentation, mute your microphone. And after the presentation, if you have any sort of queries, you can unmute yourself and you can ask your question. So let's welcome Mr. Emad. Mr. Emad, now you can quickly give a very short introduction to yourself, what you are doing, and you can immediately start your presentation. Let me welcome you once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manoj, and thank you, Vijay. My name is Emad and I'm a PhD student. As Manoj introduced me, actually, my research is in deep learning applications for time series data. And in specific, I work on biomedical sensor data like EEG and ECG. Besides, of course, human activity recognition data also can be included. And for this work, actually, I'm going to talk about a self-supervised learning application here. And so many people actually know about supervised and unsupervised learning. And recently, self-supervised learning is coming to the spot to solve the data labeling issues. And this is what I'm going to talk about in the coming slides. So let me start sharing my screen.
Sure. Please go ahead, Emad. Yeah, we can see. Right.
Yeah, so this is a recent work that was accepted in IGCAI 2021, and its title is Time Series Representational Learning by Temporal and Contextual Contrasting. This was a joint work with A-Star. So the agenda for today, I'll start by the motivations, and next I'll talk a little about self-supervised learning and what is our proposed solution, and finally I'll show some of the key results. So let's start with the motivations. So the first issue is the time series data labeling. For time series data, it's not quite distinguishable with human eyes, like, for example, image data. So here, an example of cat and dog images that can be easily identified or labeled by human to be class for cat and class for dog. But for time series data, it's quite hard task. So for example, this is an EEG signal, and we want to classify it for the corresponding sleep state, for example. But of course, we cannot do it unless we analyze the signal, and this is usually done by experts. And here also, this is another example here for human activity data. And again, we can't identify what's the human activity just by looking to the signal, but we need to do more effort. So therefore, we need to do a lot of effort to label time series data. And on the other hand, the recent advance in deep learning based methods, they usually require a massive amount of labeled data to be trained in a supervised manner. So as I just said, this might not be feasible for real-world data scenarios. So we need to find a solution to extract useful representations from unlabeled data. So I'm going to talk a little about self-supervised learning. And self-supervised learning, it includes learning representations from the unlabeled data, which we need to address. And these learned representations are found to be quite powerful, so that when they are fine-tuned with few available labeled data, they can achieve a comparable performance with the fully supervised model with the existence of a lot of labeled data. So basically, there are two main self-supervised approaches. The first is using pretext tasks, and the second is the contrastive learning. So for pretext tasks, usually we create a self-defined pseudo-labels as supervision to the model and use them to learn representations. But for contrastive learning, the aim is to group similar samples closer to each other and diverse the samples. We need them to be far from each other. The main aim of the contrastive learning. Let's start with talking a little about pretext tasks and what was the literature in this area. So pretext tasks actually the first things that started the self-supervised learning. So for example, in image data, some of the pretext tasks are solving a jigsaw puzzle. So for example, here we have this image for this tiger. So we split the image into parts and shuffle these parts and ask the model to reorder these parts again. So when the model do this task for multiple images, it will learn useful representations about the contents of the image and what they are. And this can be quite helpful for downstream tasks. Another example is to do image colorization and predicting image rotation. These are the common examples for pretext tasks. So for example, predicting image rotation, we rotate the image for multiple degrees like 0, 90, 270, and 180, and ask the model to classify what was the rotation degree. So this is another p-task, for example. So in these tasks, we know that we usually give pseudo labels to the image and use these pseudo labels as a supervised training task for the model. This was done similarly for time series data, and for example, the self-supervised learning method for ECG was applied by applying 6 transformations to the data and assigning a pseudo label according to the transformation type. And so, for example, here, this is the original image. It was given a label of 0. This is a noise addition. So we added some noise to the image and gave it a label of 1. We scale it a little, for example, scale it by 2 or 3 or half, whatever. We do the negation and give it a label of 3 and so on. So we do some transformations for the image, for the signal, and ask the model to predict what was the generated transformation. So when we do so, we find that the model usually learns good representations about the time series signal. But actually, there was found some issues for these pretext tasks. So although they gave good results and they showed their ability to extract useful representations from the unlabeled data, however, they rely on a heuristic, as we can see. Heuristic, like for example, here we choose to make these puzzles. This was an idea to mix them in a puzzles. There was another idea to make rotations, another idea to make colorization. So each heuristic will have its, might be good, might be not very good, might achieve good results, and some might not. So, and eventually these heuristics might limit the generality of the learned representations. So for example, if we train the model to classify the different rotation degrees, we might deviate the model from learning useful representations about the color of the image or the rotation of the object, which might be quite important for the original task that we want the model to be trained on. Therefore, there was a need to find another way other than this pretext tasks to extract representations from unlabeled data. And this was the contrastive learning. So the contrastive learning has the power of contrastive learning actually is its ability to learn invariant representations by using data augmentations. So we do some augmentations for the data and do some tasks to learn invariant representations. One of the most successful contrastive methods was Sinclair, and Sinclair actually depends on maximizing the similarity between the augmented views of the same image. So when we have an image, we apply two transformations to the image, usually from the same transformation family, like here, for example, this T is the same transformation family, but when doing different transformations here, the aim is to maximize the agreement between these transformations, because eventually they are for the same image, right? But in the same time, we aim to minimize the similarity between these augmentations and the augmentations of the other images. So this is one image. When we do this same process for the other image, we try to maximize the similarity between these two transformations and the transformations of the other image within the same mini batch. This is the loss here. So basically, we try to maximize this similarity between Zi and J, where Z is the extracted features here. And in the same time, we maximize the similarity of both of them against all the other samples within the mini batch. For time series data, it was another successful example was this contrastive predictive coding, or CPC. So the aim here was to predict the future time steps, but not a direct prediction task. So what happens is that we split the signal into two parts. So at time t, the previous part is the past, and the next part is the future. And we use the past time steps to generate the features, and eventually somehow we find this context CT and use this context to predict the future time steps in a contrastive way. So this was another successful example for time series data. So the motivation of our work is that most of these supervised learning based methods are proposed for image data, and you can find tons of literature in the image data self-supervised learning, but quite few actually are for time series. Maybe the CPC is the most famous, and maybe we can't find a lot of literature in the time series contrastive learning. So the issue with time series data is when we try to apply the self-supervised contrastive methods for image data on time series, we usually don't address the temporal dependencies in the time series data. And the temporal dependencies because it's important to know the future time steps, and we have to model these temporal dependencies of the future time steps based on the past ones. And another thing is that most of the augmentation techniques used for images are proposed for images, and these cannot be directly applied for time series. Like, for example, the color distortion, which is in most of the contrastive learning methods, this cannot be applied for time series. Similarly, like crop and rotation, this is quite hard to be applied and do not achieve good results for time series data. So our proposed solution here is that we do two types of contrastive learning. The first is the temporal contrasting, and the temporal contrasting, it addresses the temporal features using a tough cross-view contrastive prediction task. And we will further explain this in the coming slides. But also the contextual contrasting, it aims to find some discriminative features. Besides both of these, we propose time series specific augmentations to be used for the contrastive, for these two contrastive approaches. So this is the general framework. So first we have the signal. We apply two augmentations here, a weak augmentation and a strong one. We pass them to a shared encoder. This is shared between the two augmentations. And this is the temporal contrasting, and last is the contextual contrasting. So let's start with the augmentations. And here we apply two types of augmentations that fit any time series data. So this can be applied on image and ECG or EEG data. It can be applied on human activity data, and so on. So either the weak or the strong augmentations. And both of them are passed to the encoder. For the strong augmentation, we apply permutation and jittering strategy. So it's successive augmentations, not only one augmentation. So for the strong augmentation, we start by permuting the signal, like splitting it into parts, and then shuffle these parts and apply a little jittering, like or a noise to the permuted signal. And for the weak augmentation, we apply just the scaling, and then we add a little jitter also or noise to the scaled signal. And yeah, next, these are passed to the encoder to extract the features. And for the temporal contrasting, we also, like for CPC, we use at a time step T, we use the previous or the past time steps here to extract this context, and not use this context to predict the future time steps of the same augmented view, but it's used to predict the future time step of the other augmented view. So this is done in a cross. So that's why we call it a cross prediction task. And this is tough for cross prediction task because one of the augmentations actually is a strong augmentation. And for this strong augmentation, it's a little bit different, or having like perturbations from the original signal. So it will be tough for the model to predict the future from this augmented view. But since they are both for the same signal, it's quite logical to be able to predict these future time steps from each other. And when doing so, the model is able to extract or learn very useful representations from for time series data. And for the autoregressive model here, we use the transformer. Yeah, so the transformer here, it's actually is usual transformer that's used like pre-normalization, then a multi-head attention, and then a pre-normalization to the MLP. But here we borrowed the idea from BERT model. The BERT model actually appends a classification token to the input sentences. And finally, this classification token is the only thing that's used for classifying the sentence. So we used the same idea here, that we appended this context token here, and its state acts as the representative context vector in the output, and this is the one that's passed next and used next for predicting the future time steps. And last, for contextual contrasting, we get these contexts from the transformer, and this should be representative to the signal here. And the aim here is to increase or maximize the similarity between the contexts of the same signal, while minimizing its similarity to the contexts of the other samples within the mini batch. And this is the main aim of contextual contrasting. It's quite close to the Sinclair loss function. And finally, in overall, we combine the two losses, the temporal contrasting loss here and temporal contrasting loss for the weak and strong augmentations, besides the contextual contrasting loss. For the datasets, we used 4 datasets. 3 of them are used for most of the experiments. First is the human activity dataset and sleep EDF dataset. and EEG epilepsy dataset also. And we apply a transfer learning experiment to show the effectiveness of the transferred representations in the fault diagnosis dataset. So the last one is fault diagnosis, and it has 4 working conditions, so that each working condition is considered as a separate domain, and these are being used for the transfer learning scenarios. For our key results, first, there are 2 ways to evaluate the self-supervised pre-trained model. So the first is fine-tuning, and the second is the linear evaluation. For fine-tuning, for both, actually, we use the available label data. So after pre-training the whole model without any label data, we use this in case of the availability of few label data. So for fine-tuning, we change also the weights of the encoder. This encoder was basically used in pre-training, so we modify its weights according to the new labels, and this fully connected layer is the one doing the classification task. But the other way is the linear evaluation, and linear evaluation because we train only this linear layer, and the encoder weights are frozen. So if the self-supervised task was able to achieve quite good representations, we will be able to achieve quite good results with this linear evaluation method. So here we compared with some of the baselines, and these are for using the linear evaluation experiment. So the first row is the random initialization, and for random initialization we froze this encoder, but for random weights or initial weights, and we get the results. For supervised learning, we just pass all the data to the encoder and the fully supervised model and get the results. This SSL-ECG was the one we discussed in the literature that does some transformations for the time series data and classify these. This is a pretext task, and the CPC and Sinclair besides our framework. So we can see that for HAR and epilepsy dataset, we can achieve very good results, the best results among all these methods. And for EEG sleep classification dataset, we were able to achieve quite close results to the fully supervised model, with only training the fully connected layer and frozen encoder, which shows that the representations learned from the self-supervised task was quite powerful to achieve good results. Next is the fine-tuning experiment, but we fine-tuned the encoder with different percentages of label data. So, and compare these to a fully supervised model with this percentage of data. So for example, here we compare, when we say 1%, we use 1% of label data to train the model in a supervised manner against fine-tuning the learned representations with our TSTCC model. So we can find that with quite few label data, we are able to achieve quite good results in all the 3 datasets. And with almost 10% of label data, we are able to achieve close performance to the supervised model with 100% of labels. So here, for example, yeah, it's quite close to the 100% supervised training with only 10%. This is quite close also for CPDF and quite close for the epilepsy EEG dataset also. And finally, for transfer learning, we show that for fault diagnosis dataset, we fine-tuned the model with the available data for each source domain. And when transferring the model to another target domain, we can see that we achieve a very good performance, which is better than supervised transfer learning, and in average also we achieved a very good performance here. Also, we applied an ablation study for the effectiveness of each component here. So for the first row, we applied only temporal contrasting without using the contextual contrasting, and also without using this cross augmentation task. So for each augmented view, we predict the future time steps of the same augmented view. And next, we show the results of the cross augmentation task. And finally, we show the overall results here for the three components together. And we can see the effectiveness of this cross augmentation task, that we are able to achieve a quite good performance here. It's improving the performance with about 5% accuracy for each dataset, and almost 1% here and 1% here for the epilepsy dataset also. We also tried using 2 weak augmentations and 2 strong augmentations, because here we use 1 weak and 1 strong. So what about using both augmentations as weak augmentations and both as strong augmentations? We can see that the results are not quite effective for using only 1 type of augmentations for both branches. And the main reason actually is that, here for strong augmentations, the aim here is to make the model, make the prediction task quite tough and make it more challenging for the model. This is by using, so if we use strong augmentations for both branches, we are not able to achieve a good performance. And also, if both of them are weak augmentations, then it's not hard for the model to make the prediction task. We use here weak augmentation to give a model to make the prediction, to make the data. This weak augmentation is quite close to the data. It's just a scaled version of the original data. So the model will be able to identify the original data in the test phase data. That's the importance of using 1 weak augmentation besides the strong augmentation. This was the presentation. Thank you for viewing, and I hope this was informative.
Emad, thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. In fact, so how this time series data is really, really challenging part in the research. May I request all the audience out there, if you have any queries, any questions related to the presentation, please you can unmute your mic and directly forward the question to our presenter, Emad. Or if you like to write in a chat also, okay, I can read that out. Vijay, I think you have any queries? You are already on the video, so you can just unmute yourself and ask a question.
No, I think let's take from the audience questions, and then,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So waiting from the audience. Maybe Vijay, you can start, and maybe audience, other friends can also join later. Or yeah, Vijay, you have any queries right now, or shall I start?
You can start. Yeah.
Okay, so I was actually wondering, although this research is not one of my fields, but time series data, when it comes to time series, it's really, really interesting because last year I was working in time series problem. But how, Emad, did you select the data set for your experiments? What did you initially consider, when selecting the data set?
Yeah, first I was working before on sleep stage classification problem, and this was using the EEG dataset. This was one of the datasets that I used here. Yeah, the sleep EDF dataset. This one I have previous work on it, so it was easy for me to use it. And the epilepsy dataset, it's also quite close. It's also an EEG dataset. For human activity and fault diagnosis, my co-author Mohammed was working on these datasets. So yeah, he helped me to make them working for this.
Okay, so all those data sets that you selected, they are different in nature, or how they are different? I mean, one data set was not enough for you?
Actually, it's quite hard to validate the effectiveness of a method with using only one data set. So you have to try it, because here we claim it's for time series, right? So we need to select different time series applications to validate our method on them. So if you only used one data set, it will be, for example, for sleep EDF, it will be eventually for sleep staging, for example. If it's only for epilepsy, it will be only for epilepsy. But we try to actually, I started with working on sleep EDF dataset because, as I told you, this was my previous work on this dataset. But then when my co-author Mohammed, he suggested that we can test on different datasets and see if it's effective or not. And yeah, actually it was quite effective for human activity dataset. And yeah, we also tried for fault diagnosis. Yeah, it was effective for multiple datasets. That's why our claim came from using like time series data, time series application.
Right, right. So you also mentioned that the framework you are using is a part of transformer, is it? How
The
you're
transformer
using?
is a part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How are you using this transformer in your experiment? How is it like helpful in your part of framework?
Yeah. So here we to make this prediction, we need an autoregressive model. So
Okay.
autoregressive models there are many types of autoregressive models like LSTM, GRU, and transformers. So we tried to we tried actually LSTM at the beginning to get this context, but eventually the main thing is how to get this context vector, the best context vector, the best representative context vector for these past time steps. This was the main thing. So LSTM was able to achieve this, but transformer was achieving better performance and extracting better context about the previous time steps. That's why we continued with using the transformers here.
Okay, okay. That sounds good. Vijay, I think you
I have a question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So I was wondering on the temporal cluster contrasting part of this architecture, like you kind of predict one future time step thing, right? Like the token there. So have you thought of its relation to the skipgram model? Like if you consider the basic word to vec model where at certain word position the model is trained to predict the word at a certain position, and then that's how it learns representations. So is it like something related to that, or you just have, I mean, after if two time step is given, you predict a future ones? So I mean, to that, just thinking in context of generalizing these to NLP, like NLP data sets.
Yeah, here we predict like multiple time steps, not only one or two. And actually, one of the studies in the paper was about the selection of the future time steps. How much should this T be at? Like, and we found that in most data sets, it's better to predict 40% of the original times for the original time series sample. So here
I see.
like we use 60% as the past time steps and try to predict the next 40%. Yeah, so, but this of course differs. This can be different according if we used different time series data, we can use different ratio here.
And these can be can these be fine grained, like in like you have a context of time steps, and then you just predict one, and then you do it for I mean, you create several candidate such subsets in the entire signal you have of all the total t steps, and then kind of combine the like result or average or some kind of combinations to give the total scores. I mean, I'm just curious, like, because I was trying to relate it to the skipgram like models that creates word representations initially.
Yeah,
So okay. So in this, like, you just have a 40% future predictions, and you
so
do like that, yeah.
predicting only one time step will not be useful because you will have a lot of paths, and predicting only one time step, it will be quite easy. This is the point here. So we need to
Oh, I see.
predict more. And yeah, the contrasting here occurs between the predictions of the model based on this context. It should be maximized with the context of the same augmented view, and also minimized with the whole signals in the mini batch. So yeah, basically here we don't usually predict only one time step or two. We try to predict more than this. Yeah, that's
And
why we selected to be a percentage, because different time series data have different lengths. For example, the EEG we have 3K time steps. For HAR, we have only 128. So it's different from one time series to another, and also the encoder, the features after the encoder will be different from one time series to the other. That's why we formulated that as a percentage, right?
okay,
Not
okay.
a specific number to be predicted.
Okay. And for the regressive part, right? I mean, you if consider it, all the time signals were fixed time steps. So did you like try to have a zero shot, like just predict all the time steps at once, or like it doesn't work intuitively, and then you have to resort to auto-regressive kind of processing of the transformer encoder?
No, actually, we don't predict in advance.
It
Yeah, we
becomes
have.
difficult.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Emad.
Vijay, thank you for the question. Let's wait for a few more friends. Maybe they can ask. Anyone out there? I see Pasquale. I already know some of them, right? If you do not have any queries, so maybe we can. I think what you can do is, if you have any queries, then you can directly send message to Emad, because we are sharing this video online, and we'll be sharing that video to all of you once again. And thank you, everyone attending this this session. Thank you, Vijay, for asking the questions. Emad, thank you so much. That was really a wonderful presentation from your side. And I think we also have a very small gift for you, but since this is online, we cannot provide you right now. So, but I'm sure our president Vijay will send you a very small gift on behalf of SCSE-GSC, a very small gift, a cup of, I think, very nice cup is there to share with you. Thank you, Emma. Thank you so much.
Very much.
And I, on behalf of SCSE-GSC, I wish you all the best in your PhD and future career as well. We'll definitely be in touch. And if you, in the future, definitely you're going to publish lots and lots of papers. I'm pretty sure about that. You're a very hardworking person. I know that because I know you personally as well. And if you like to share any of your work right there in this SLS platform, you are always welcome, and we look forward to meeting you again. And I request other friends out there who are attending this SLS talk, if you have any sort of research work you want to share with us, please, you you can directly email to SCSE-GSC email, or you can contact one of us who are actually closely working in SCSE-GSC group. And please, I request all of you to come forward and please attend our regular this SLS program. So we'll definitely bring a few more interesting talk in the future, definitely. Emad, thank you so much. Having said this, I like to say goodbye and be safe, be strong. See you next time, everyone. Thank you so much.
Okay,
thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, Emad.